Welcome to this Canadian Patriot Podcast. And don't let the name deceive you. I think for people who have been following this channel, this program, my work, though the name is Canadian Patriot, there is no need to isolate the considerations of what's affecting Canada to Canada because it is, we live in history. History is something which is basically made up of all of the time that has passed behind us, shaping our current situation, as well as the entire world as a chemistry. What we do or what we think we can do is entirely shaped by considerations of what has been influencing us, what has been shaping our culture, our identity, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that our enslavement, the people have woken up in the Western world increasingly, especially in the last few years, to the fact that what we thought of as our freedoms and our democracy are a lot more partaking in illusion than the real thing that is freedom. And so part of that awareness of the danger of a restoration of feudalism, the destruction of those freedoms that we've taken for granted, has a lot to do with the responsibilities to our future, to our posterity, as well as to humanity more generally, that we've permitted to be abused by highly sociopathic institutions, which have transgenerational control and influence over the world, especially many of those mining, banking, and other institutions that we have permitted to rape and pillage the world in order to secure certain comforts and expectations of consumer comfort that have we were born into. I'm here referring to many of the extraction of wealth, of mining, of child labor that is pervasive around the world, that is part of the system that is globalization. And one of the major points of extraction of abuse has been, of course, the continent of Africa. Right now, I have PD Lawton, who has agreed to have a discussion to provide some very important strategic updates regarding some very important battlefronts within Africa, especially the Democratic Republic of Congo, and a lot more. So, PD, thank you so much for doing this, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. How are you doing?
Well, it's great to be talking to you again, Matt, and I really do appreciate the opportunity that you're giving me to talk about this subject, which is very close to my heart. So thank you to you.
No, thank you. And you've done impeccable work. I've been following your work. We've been friends now for about 5 or 6 years, and you've really established, I think, a wonderful platform for analysis, but also not just, I mean, many people in the alternative media world, they tend to be very good at showcasing a lot of the points of corruption, breaking down an analysis of all of the bad things. But you do that, but you go further, and that's what I really appreciate about your approach is that you're always solution oriented, and you've got a sensitivity to the drama of history and how things have been tragic in the past when weaker, smaller people who should have been bigger chose to be small and resulted in travesty after travesty in Africa as well as in the world as a whole, but also in terms of looking towards our future, living in history as we do. And so recently, you've done two things. You reached out to me, you shared with me a few articles that you've written, especially regarding an atrocity going on right now that I was not fully aware of in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And you painted a picture in your analysis. It's a long piece on your africanagenda.net website. Again, a fantastic website. You also brought to my attention that you have a fundraiser to assist in the travesty that is underway right now. Millions of people are in these camps that I didn't even know about. Could you say a little bit about what was behind your analysis and your call to create um, this support page to help people help those who are trapped in these camps? Like, what are these camps? Why are people in there? What's going on?
Well, getting back to something that you mentioned there, um, in terms of Africa, there's a very, very clear picture that is there for anyone to see, should they so wish to do so.
Mm.
And that is that any element of development has to be fought for. We live under an extremely Malthusian empire, City of London, Wall Street, as you and your wife Cynthia talk about a lot on the Rising Tide Foundation and Canadian Patriot Press. And in Africa, every step towards development, towards the industrialization of their economies, has to be fought for on the battleground. And if you look at the case of the DRC, Congo, it's called Congo, DRC. DRC is Democratic Republic of Congo. That is an excellent case in point. It is the second largest country in Africa, over 300 million square kilometers, I do believe. So if you go from East Coast to West Coast, it's like flying from London to Moscow.
Wow.
It is absolutely vast. It is, this is a scale most people in the West are unable to conceive of the scale of countries in Africa, and particularly the DRC being the second largest. So it also has the world's worst infrastructure deficit. So that's quite something, isn't it? That the second largest country in Africa has also the world's largest deficit.
Yeah.
It's you know, where do you go with industrializing an economy when you have such a poor state of infrastructure?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, development has to be fought for. And if you look at Congo on the map, it's slap bang in the middle. It's the heart of Africa. It's Central Africa, and it's stopping any north to south trade development. If you have this great big horrific scene in the central in the Great Lakes, you are hindering any inter-African trade. You're hindering the development of the continent as a whole, which is one of the reasons that there's this continuing crisis in the Great Lakes region. It's called the Great Lakes, like you have in Canada. In Central Africa, it's referred to as les Grands Lacs, because many of the countries are French-speaking. Burundi is French-speaking, Congo is French-speaking, Rwanda used to be French-speaking, but since the coup of 1994, note I said the coup, not the genocide, the coup of 1994, it is English-speaking. So it's called the Grand Lac. And we have a situation at present, the empire is crumbling, as you so ably talk about, and we're seeing a crunch. We're living in these hideous days where everything is coming to a crunch. The world's focus is on Gaza and the 40,000 Palestinians who are now dead, but they don't look at the other crunch situation, which has been going on equally as long a period of time in Congo, in Eastern Congo, where some 12 million people, and that's a low estimate, have died. And they haven't died on the battleground. They have been killed in massacres. And these massacres put another meaning on the word atrocity. So if I could explain to you what these atrocities look like and sound like, they involve the most horrendous sexual violence. They involve people being buried alive. They involve people being tortured in ways that you wouldn't even have dreamed of. These atrocities are something that us in the West have no concept of, the brutality, the savagery.
When you say 12 million people have died this way, this is in how many years? This is how recently?
Since 1997.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, since 1997. So we are now coming to crunch point in Congo. So we've had these last 3 decades of continuing, ongoing, completely ignored. The world is deaf, dumb, and blind to anything that has ever happened in Congo, and that's continuing to happen, because it's strategically better that there's this wall of silence. And they also do another thing, very clever little thing, which I'll come to in a minute, by making it very confusing. And when things are confusing, people turn away. And this has been a very, very deliberate tactic. Yeah, so getting back to crunch time. So this has been going on unnoticed by the world, but we have now got a situation in North Kivu. So just explaining to your listeners, we're talking about Eastern Congo in the Great Lakes, and you have 3 provinces in the Eastern Congo. The northernmost is Ituri, then you have North Kivu, then you have South Kivu. And the real crunch right now is in North Kivu and also in Ituri. So at the moment we have, we don't know exactly the numbers, but we're assuming, I mean, a UN report said there's 6.8 million displaced people in Eastern Congo, which would mean those 3 provinces. Now, there are IDP, internally displaced people's camps, growing by the day around the capital city, which is called Goma. Goma is the capital of North Kivu. And Maurice Carney of Friends of the Congo has informed people that there are nearly 1 million in just one of the camps. That's called Belengo. Nearly 1 million in Bolengo. There are 17 of these camps around Goma. So the situation has reached absolutely critical, dire point. You've had so much violence since Biden came in and the Biden administration. The violence is off the charts. So Congolese people actually love Trump because under Trump, things calmed right down. And as soon as the Biden administration came in, all hell broke loose. So you have the most horrendous amounts of violence happening, and you have 6.8 million people fleeing in the Eastern Congo. So in North Kivu, they're fleeing towards Goma.
I'm gonna just share a map quickly just to stay
sure.
on point here. So I just pulled up a quick map on a Google search, and just to be clear, North Kivu here is this Nord Kivu. This is a French map. In the Congo, so the DRC is everything in white, and South Kivu is right below it. And you're saying all of the camps are all located in North Kivu and South Kivu, or
no? We're talking about North Kivu. We're talking about the camps around Goma. So there's Lake Kivu, and Goma is just situated on Lake Kivu. You'll see it outlined there. That's it. That's it there, where you've got your mark.
Right on the border of Rwanda, below that's Burundi.
On the border of Rwanda.
Above that's Uganda. And all right, thank you.
Okay, and then above that is Ituri. So that's the section we're talking about. That's referred to as Eastern Congo.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's helpful. Okay, good.
Yeah. So all those people, and they are being classified, which is, I think, and I'm just finally tuning into this, as IDPs rather than refugees. And it's very important because I think it's how, and I may be wrong on this, okay, but I think it's how UNHCR are managing to get away with not doing their job because they're being classed as IDPs. So you've got potentially 1.5 million people in these camps around Goma.
What's an IDP? Can you?
Internally displaced person.
Okay.
If you have a refugee who's fled from one country to another, they are under the jurisdiction of UNHCR. If you have an IDP, they're under the jurisdiction of that country. And I think this is part of the problem, is the classification of the people who are in the camps and why they're just being left to die. So the people are mostly from, and this is where it gets very, very interesting. So they're mostly from the areas Masisi, Rutshuru, and Iragongo. And these areas are predominantly full of Kinyarwandan speaking Congolese. So I'll explain that more in a minute. There are also people coming from Ituri because the most horrendous things are happening in Ituri. But they are IDPs, internally displaced people. So if I can just explain the situation in these camps. And, it was described to me a few days ago by a colleague of mine there were three of them actually, who went to take some clothing to the unaccompanied, which basically means orphaned, children in one of the camps, just one of the camps. And they have nothing. And so my colleagues took some clothing to them. And my colleagues are all adults. They're adults, they're men. They have been used to seeing suffering because all Congolese have. It's not something that is unfamiliar to any Congolese person. They know about suffering. And these three colleagues came back utterly shocked. And their words were in French, horrible, une misère extraordinaire. So in English, horrible, an extraordinary misery. They were moved to tears. And these are people who know about suffering. But when they saw what was going on in those camps, they were seriously, seriously disturbed. So what is actually happening is that, I am coming more and more to the conclusion these are extermination camps. The whole idea is for these people to die, which they are. They are dying. And we have confirmed reports that they are dying of starvation. They're dying of disease. They're dying of starvation. They're dying of just the lack of any basic amenities.
Yeah.
So for one thing, there is no health care. Absolutely no health care. There are no social assistance whatsoever. There are no basic amenities. Food is coming to some parts of the camps every few months. To other parts of the camps, people are saying they'll go 2 to 3 days without eating. And I know what that tactic is because I've come across it before in the prisons. And if you make people go for a continued length of time where they only get access to food once every 2 or 3 days, you starve them to death, but you do it slowly so nobody notices. And that's what's happening. I've been told it's a very slow death by hunger. Your body just starts to shut down. Your organs start to shut down if you're only eating every 2 to 3 days. And the meals that they will be receiving are probably just a carbohydrate, cassava, maybe maize, something like that, just simply a carbohydrate-based meal.
Yeah.
So no nutrition in it apart from carbohydrate. They might get some beans, something like that if they're lucky.
And so just to be clear, there's something like 1.7 million people in these camps, or what's the approximate number right now?
Yeah, we know there's nearly 1 million in Bulengo, which is the biggest camp. But there's 17 camps.
Wow. So there might be way more than the 1.7 million I was just throwing out there. There might be
1.7 million, 1.5 million. We don't know, but we know for certain there's nearly 1 million in the largest camp.
So look, you're getting across an intention for a vast genocide. Who's behind this intention? I got the sense in reading your material that the DRC government can't be held accountable or responsible for this. So who is?
Well, yeah.
Like, because you were bringing up, the factor of Kagame. You're bringing up the factor of Rwandan involvement, U.S. involvement as well, UN involvement. Like there's a whole bunch of supranational and external actors at play who seem to be behind this, but I don't quite understand how and
Well,
why are they doing this?
well, for anyone to understand this 3 decades of crisis in Eastern Congo,
Mm.
you have to go back to the roots. And the roots are with what happened in 1994 in Rwanda
Okay, so let's do that.
and, bef-
You
and
you've
before
you've
then.
called you've called everyone knows about the Rwandan genocide. That's something that's been hammered at us for a long time. I've read Shake Hands with the Devil by um
Dalier,
Daliel,
Dalier,
yeah, and I listened to him
yeah.
speak, and he turned into an alcoholic, and he saw some crazy stuff, but he didn't seem to have a handle on what was really behind what was going on. He was sort of caught, it seems, in a storm, or maybe he was part of it. I don't know. But what's your take? You called it a coup. You've made a point that there's a deeper, truer story behind the popular messaging. So what exactly happened between the Hutus and the Tutsis that we call this Rwandan massacre, and how does that impact the current situation?
Oh, so if we go back to the Great Lakes, let's say prior to 1990,
Mm.
um, and I've heard this from so many people, Rwandans, Congolese, Burundians. This was a very, very peaceful region by and large,
Mm.
an extended family, where it was completely normal for, if you were, say, Congolese, to cross the border into Rwanda or Uganda or Burundi or anywhere. People cross the border, at the weekend, go visit family, go home. Families intermarrying, people intermarrying between different nationalities. Hutus married Tutsis. There's this recent thing, this holy divide of the Tutsis and the Hutus is all part of the trick.
Mm.
But what has happened is we have been fed an official narrative. We've been fed a story of what happened in Rwanda 1994 that completely vindicates the Tutsis, and the Hutus are all genocidaires. They're
Yeah.
all the ones who committed the genocide.
Yeah. For those who
So
don't know, that massacre, that was over 1 million people who were hacked to death in large numbers. We've been told, I think the official story, like you just said, is the Hutus, which are the majority of the population, went crazy one day in a rabid bloodlust, killed a whole bunch of the minority Tutsi group that had been sort of the Brahmins administering the government for a very long time with certain abuses and things. But it was like you said, the blame is on the crazy Hutus that we were told just simply wanted death and murder and revenge, and they got it. And so that's the official narrative. So what's the more truthful story in your digging?
well, if we go back
Mm.
to what actually happened with the creation. So we have a creation of a useful tool,
Mm.
and the useful tool for the empire being the City of London, Wall Street monolith, the corporate monolith.
Yeah.
The useful tool is a Tutsi elite. And the Tutsi elite are a Tutsi monarchy. They're the aristocratic families of the Tutsi.
Mm.
Now, they ruled Rwanda and Burundi. They unthroned the Burundian Hutu monarchy, and it took power in Burundi as well. But we'll just stick for now with Rwanda. So
This is when did this overthrow of the Hutu monarchy happen? This is before colonialism or
this was in
during?
Burundi. we'll keep that separate and
Burundi,
just
okay.
talk about Rwanda,
Okay.
because it becomes complex in that sense. But we're just going back in time to the Belgian and German rule of this region, Rwanda, Burundi.
Yeah.
At the time of Belgian rule, the Tutsi monarchy were in power in Rwanda.
Okay.
And they were, by all accounts, a particularly, choose my words carefully, they were very aristocratic in their nature. So you had this elite that lived in a good fashion, and then you had your basis of serfs, you know, like monarchies of old, you know. And most of the serfs, the peasants, were landless, had no right to own livestock. Now, most of those were Hutus who had to work the land, had to pay their tithes to the monarchy, but they had an extremely poor quality of life. There were also Tutsis among them who were subject to these same conditions. So the Tutsi monarchy were not nice. So what happened was you had this growing sentiment, this need for change among Rwandans. And that's where we need to get away from the Hutu Tutsi and talk about Rwandans. So the Rwandans, by and large, coming up towards the 1950s, had enough of being subjects of this very autocratic and cruel regime under the Tutsi monarchy. And there began a social revolution.
Just to be clear, the Tutsi monarchy at the time were they working with the colonialists that were overseeing it, or is this after colonialism had ended?
Yes, no, colonialism hadn't ended at that point. They were working with them because the colonialists, imperial powers, always like to select one group and rule through them. That's a very typical trait.
Right.
So what happened was you had the social revolution, and you had the majority of people wanting an extreme change, wanting a republic, which was what was given to them in 1959. They achieved that under their first president, Gregoire Kayibanda, who was a Hutu. All the Tutsi monarchists and the dynasties themselves all went into exile. And this is where it all starts. So these Tutsi monarchists and their acolytes went into exile, mostly into Uganda. And this was in the 60s. In time, they ended up in Washington, but we'll come to that later. So you then have to look at the history of Uganda, which is a neighboring country. And you had a situation in Uganda where you had the first president, Milton Obote. And remember that Uganda was termed the Pearl of Africa by the British. It was a British colony. I think it still is. So you had Milton Obote, who came in and wanted to bring in some socialism, you know, to actually care for the people of Uganda. So of course, this was not what the empire wanted, and they had to get rid of Milton Obote, which they did by getting in Idi Amin, who will be well known to many people. Now, Idi Amin, there was pretty much a bit of a bloodbath under him, and he became a staunch anti-Semite. He hated Israel. Anyway, the powers that be had to get rid of him. Nair of Tanzania then brought Milton Obote back in to Uganda. The empire didn't want Milton Obote running Uganda, So they supported Yoweri Museveni, who is the current president, and he's been the president of Uganda for several decades. Every time he gets elected, it's the same with Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda. Every time these people get re-elected, there's not a peep, huh? Not a peep out of anyone saying, oh, hang on a minute, these guys have been here for how many decades? But you get something happening like Venezuela, and or hell breaks loose. Right. So so getting back to to Uganda, in order to get rid of Milton Obote, the British, the Empire, sponsored Yoweri Museveni, and Yoweri Museveni fought a savage civil war to unseat Milton Obote. That war is called the Bush War. It was in the 1980s. I don't know why they called it the Bush War. It was really horrific. How many people in the Loweri Triangle Museveni killed? Vast numbers. Anyway, so the Tutsis who were exiled from Rwanda were used in Yoweri Museveni's army. So this is where we all start connecting to Paul Kagame and the current president. The current president of Rwanda.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we fast forward, we've now got Yoweri Museveni in power in Uganda, and you have Gregoire Kayibanda in Rwanda, and the empire wants to somehow get rid of this troublesome republic, which is actually very French allied, under the first president and then the second president, Habyarimana. They were allies of France.
Okay.
So the empire wanted to change that situation. And in comes the use of this exiled Tutsis, who then ran terrorist campaigns inside Rwanda.
Oh.
So we're coming now to the early 1990s, leading up to 1994 and the coup of 1994. So you've got the British and American sponsored Yoweri Museveni, who has been put in power by this the Tutsi exiles in Uganda. And they are now trying to regain power in their home country of Rwanda.
Oh, that's how it happened. So just to be clear, so the Tutsis, after being overthrown in this revolution, the social revolution in the 50s, the elites among them migrated, or at least found a safe haven in Uganda. Right. And then built up.
Helped.
Yep.
Yeah.
Built up their edifice.
To put Museveni in power.
Later on, Museveni in power. Okay. And then Museveni was sort of their asset?
No. So then Museveni is the asset of empire. I just call it empire for simplicity's sake. Okay.
All right. And
so then their role, Museveni's role, was to support what we can now call the Rwandan Patriotic Front, the RPF. These are Kagame's forces. So Yoweri Museveni harbors, finances, funds, trains, supports this external army to fight terrorist incursions inside the borders of Rwanda.
Okay, so they go in from Uganda into Rwanda and then install Kagame, or that's how Kagame gets power.
That's how Kagame and the RPF got in power.
And then they recolonize their lost land that they had gotten expelled from decades earlier. Now they're back in control with Kagame in Rwanda.
Yeah.
Okay.
And have been for the last 30 years.
Okay.
So that's the evolution of Paul Kagame. But what was so critical to that was that you had to have, for the world, you had to have a picture of Paul Kagame and the Rwandan Patriotic Front, the RPF, as the liberators of Rwanda.
Mm.
And you had to be able to paint a picture of the Tutsi as on pedestals, that they are the victims of history, the victims of this terrible genocide, which it was, but they were the victims. So you've got your two sides, the good and the bad. So history is always painting the Tutsi as the victims of what happened, and the Hutus as the genocidaires.
Gotcha.
And that is what has come down to us.
Okay.
The repercussions of that are horrendous.
So can I ask you what was it that initiated this slaughter in 1994? Like, how did they manage to get? I mean, I've heard you in the past refer to this as an inside job of a sense.
Yeah.
How did they initiate? How did they get that?
Well, if we draw comparisons now with these camps in Goma, and this is why I'm so concerned, because history repeats itself. And until you understand history, history will repeat itself. And I'm worried that they're going to do something with these 1.5, 1.7 million eternally displaced people in the camps in Goma, to initiate something, because it's what they did in Kigali in Rwanda in 1994.
Oh, okay.
So in Kigali, being the capital of Rwanda, right prior to 1994, you had enormous numbers of internally displaced Rwandans escaping the atrocities and the terrorism of Paul Kagame's RPF, who were running these incursions from Uganda over the border into Rwanda. They were raising things, absolutely raising, killing the livestock, destroying the crops. People were fleeing. Foods became very, very scarce, and people were fleeing en masse to escape the RPF, Paul Kagame's RPF, and they were escaping to Kigali. So prior to 1994, you had vast numbers of IDPs. Now, who killed who? I never want to be accused of being of reversing things and say, oh, the Hutu were totally innocent of everything. That's not true. But you have got people, and I'm going to flash a book at you. It's Barry Collins, The Myth of the Okazu Genocide. It's a very, very good book. It's very expensive. I wonder why that is. And it's a very good document of the processes. So there's a lot one has to bring into it. There's a lot about why the Hutus, among the Hutu population, there was a lot of anger, a lot of fear, a lot of resentment towards the Tutsi, and there was a reason for that, because at the time, so prior to 1994, you had all these terrorist incursions coming across, indiscriminately killing Rwandans, whether they were Hutus or Tutsis. They were indiscriminately killing them. Remember that Paul Kagame's RPF is a monarchical, an imperialist. It's an imperialist system, body, entity. They do not care about poor people. They do not care about anyone who is not within their elite circles. So they really couldn't care if they were Tutsi or Hutu, unless they're useful to them.
Yeah.
And you had in Rwanda at the time, you had the Tutsi families were being obliged to send one child, at least one son, and money to this Tutsi campaign being operated by the RPF. And the Hutu communities knew that was going on. They knew it was going on.
Okay.
So there was tremendous resentment building. Right. So there's a lot of detail. There's a lot of stuff.
Like no, I see what you're saying, and you can see it today everywhere. Like this technique that's been used both in history, but also you see it in British India and Pakistan, but you see it also in the terrible conditions in the Gaza as well, and the atrocities that are creating a pressure cooker of buildup, psychospiritual buildup amongst an oppressed people that will inevitably backlash, and that's necessarily how it works. And so what you're saying is they created a pressure cooker of destruction before the massacre happened, with these terrorist campaigns that were launched, doing scorched earth policies, destroying people's lives in the Hutu dominated communities. And that then resulted in a very foreseeable reaction against that, which is what we were then told out of context is this irrational mass violence of death that the Hutus demanded on the minority group. That's what you're saying?
And there's far more to it than that.
Okay.
And that's where Dallaire comes in and shake hands with the devil.
Okay.
So how many people, when you've got this massive amount of internally displaced people around Kigali, how many were actually macheted to death by Paul Kagame's RPF? I don't know. But I would say it was probably a shockingly high number. Because the genocide has been the cover story. It's been the perfect story to shield Paul Kagame and RPF from any prosecution, from any questioning of the events that took place, and for the Tutsi to be forevermore victimized. An extremely unhealthy and corrupting lie of history that people have had to live with for 30 years. So, yeah.
So in terms of Romeo Dallaire, I mean, he's been turned into quite the hero for Canadians. He was made a senator, given awards out of the wazoo because he was the man in charge of the peacekeeping mission down there, and he became. It seems like he really went through a little bit of hell on earth. It seems he became a hardcore alcoholic, got himself together. Now he's a hero. Was he aware of some of these operations, or would you consider him more of like a victim of circumstance who found himself in something he didn't understand and then just kind of played into a script that was built up to enforce this victim identity amongst the Tutsis? Or how would you characterize him?
I think that the UN knew exactly what was going on.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you look at Congo now and what's happening with MONUSCO, the peacekeeping force in Congo that's been there for, I think, 22, 23 years, you will understand the UN's role in this whole thing. And it's been the same role all along.
Okay.
Because we haven't even touched on Congo. We've been
context is everything. Context is so important. So this is what I really appreciate with you. You know your material so well, and so I'm just learning and taking notes. And so this is helping us now get a sense of, we're triangulating in on the current situation in the Congo, which we couldn't understand if we didn't know these things. And even now, you're saying that Kagame is even now involved or very much a factor in the atrocities that we're seeing unfolding in the Congo. Is so rich, like you said, it's such a rich place. You made this point very clearly in your writings, the resources, the rare earths, the minerals, the water, the abundant richness of the soil. Like there's so much wealth, but it's so poor and crisis ridden. And now there's
Uh,
this on top of it. So could we get to the current situation a bit more? Or do you want to still paint a bit more backstory?
no, that's fine.
Okay.
If we just fast forward to the geographic location of Rwanda,
Mm-hmm.
now Rwanda is, in comparison to Congo, it's tiny,
Mm-hmm.
and there's very little mineral reserves. As far as I know, there's no gold. Um, as far as I know, there's no coltan or cobalt in Rwanda itself. It's very, very small,
Mm-hmm.
Rwanda.
Mm-hmm.
All the riches are in North Kivu, South Kivu, and Ituri. So just to give you an example of the riches in Ituri, there's what is called the Moto Kilo Gold Belt that runs through Ituri. Now, the Moto Kilo gold belt is the richest deposit of gold on Earth.
Mm.
It's vast. I've seen pictures of people not just finding like nuggets of gold, finding rocks.
Like boulders almost. Yeah, I've seen those too. Yeah.
So hence you understand why people just 3 weeks ago, 25 women, children, including toddlers and babies, were slaughtered in cold blood and left in a heap.
So
This is happening in Ituri all the time.
how does that explain that? Why did that happen?
It's just one of the massacres. It's happening all the time.
Mm.
And it happened in Jugu territory, which is where the gold is.
Okay.
So you have, we're getting to the riches of Congo. So you've got Rwanda strategically placed. So what happened with empire? The corporate monoliths of City of London and Wall Street, okay? They've known all along about the cobalt, the coltan, the gold, the diamonds, the whatever you can think of, it's there. It's unbelievably rich in mineral resources. Eastern Congo. So they wanted a basis, a nexus of control in the Great Lakes. And what they have done is they've used an ideology of Tutsi supremacy to try and rule Burundi. They failed, but there was some awful things happened. They've now got this Tutsi supremacist entity running Rwanda for the last 30 years. And they are infiltrated, they've infiltrated the establishment of Congo, but I don't know if we can go into that at the moment, but they have done that, and that was done through an agreement, a peace agreement called Sun City, signed in 2003 between Kagame, Thabo Mbeki, the president at the time of South Africa, negotiated those peace talks. That was George Bush, and they basically put a Rwandan as Prime Minister of Congo.
Oh.
All the warlords who had been massacring and slaughtering Congolese, Rwandan warlords or Rwandan allied warlords, they turned those militias into political parties and gave them positions within government. So there was a complete infiltration of Congo's establishment. It's such a big story.
Oh my God. Yeah, I didn't know that. Oh wow.
So, but getting back to say a good word about Congo's government, in particular, President Tshisekedi. When you think, why are these camps that we were talking about in the beginning in Goma, why are these people going without food, without healthcare, without anything, any social assistance whatsoever? And you say, because Westerners, we love to do this. It's the government, it's the corrupt government that's taking all the money,
Yeah, it's the easy answer to all.
the easy
It's the
answer.
easy way to avoid having to think too hard about anything. You could just
Exactly.
yeah.
So just a few years ago, the annual budget of the second largest country in Africa that provides, let me get it right, 86% of the world's coltan, which is what is needed in all computers, in all cell phones, in all digital technology. I'll get that percentage check, Matt, but I'm pretty sure there's something like that. So 68%. So their annual budget, right, for this vast country, not that long ago, was $6 billion.
Wow. Oh my.
What can you do with $6 billion and you have a population of over 100 million people?
Yeah, they're trying to extend. They're trying to extend the metro line, the subway line in Montreal, like a couple of extra stops, and it's going to cost like $10 billion. It's like ridiculous, and that's
There
like
you
more
go.
than the budget was of all
Yeah.
of the Democratic Republic of Congo a few years
Yeah.
ago. Oh my god.
So don't go pointing fingers
Yeah.
at the government before you know that.
Yeah.
And 90% of the revenue is from mining.
Mm.
So point your attention at those tech companies, point your attention at Apple, Tesla, any of the companies that are dealing in the minerals. And we're not just talking coltan. Actually, the key mineral is cobalt. That's the one they're really after. And they're really after the cobalt because of its heat-resistant properties. So it's needed in nuclear. It's needed in anything, space exploration, anything that's going to take very, very high temperatures, particularly nuclear. And they need cobalt for that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's being mined in the areas where these people have fled from to the camps in Goma.
You're saying that they've been expelled from or fled from areas that are rich in cobalt, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
So what you have, and we're getting back to this. Are we on a time limit, Matt?
No, I rescheduled my next meeting because this is just so interesting. So keep going. No hard stop.
Thank you so much. So we get back to the formation of Rwanda as this nexus of control. And remembering that in 1994, the geologists, informing all the corporations, the City of London extractive industry, they all knew about the riches of Eastern Congo back then. And they wanted to subsume those provinces. That's still the goal of Rwanda, to annex territory of North Kivu.
Mm.
So you've had a situation that since 1996, Rwanda has been, remember Rwanda is known in Africa as the Singapore of Africa. It's supposedly such a prosperous country. Kigali is spotless, you've got skyscrapers. Oh, it's all such a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful place under Paul Kagame. But we'll come to that more. And what they've been doing is feeding off the illicitly traded minerals, Congolese minerals. So you have, and I have to say, these are not my words, but they're fantastic words, utopian level deregulation. Okay, scholar called Shahid Bolson said that, but I just love that term. It explains everything. Utopian level deregulation. So when you have complete destabilization of a region, which is what we've had in North Kivu and Ituri, and also previously in South Kivu, you have a destabilized environment, you have a low intensity ongoing warfare, and you have supposedly no investors want to come near it. Meanwhile, you have your corporate powers who are trading in the most fantastic profits in these very important strategic minerals of cobalt and coltan, plus all the rest, the gold, the diamonds, what have you.
Right.
And all of this from those areas has been going through Rwanda, through the Rwandan books. Okay. Well, officially, some of it will go through. So there's a processing plant, a coltan processing plant in Rwanda. Rwanda doesn't have any coltan. Rwanda, up until recently, was one of the top 10 gold exporters.
Wow. Okay, what an irony, eh?
Gold.
They have no gold, but they were one of the top 10 gold exporters. How does that happen? Right. Nobody asked that question. They're stealing it.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
My God.
So it's illicitly traded. Here,
let's just look at this image again, just so people have this in their mind. Okay, so this is, just to be clear, you got Goma, that camp, the horrific camp right there on the border of Rwanda. Got North Kivu right here, South Kivu there, and you're saying that there's direct theft happening from the mines, the cobalt mine or gold mines, especially in and around Goma, mostly, or those whole zones.
In North Kivu. North Kivu.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. And yeah, so this is nothing new. Hey, this has been going on for a very, very long time.
Okay.
But it gets more complex than that, and we have to go back to the infiltration of the DRC establishment to fully understand it.
Okay, let's do it.
So I have to talk about the Tutsi supremacy. So when I say Tutsi supremacy, I'm not talking about Tutsi people. Okay, I am simply talking about this elite echelon.
Yes. Yeah, it's like when we're talking about Nazi white supremacists, we don't mean German people. We just mean that there is a small subcult within that grouping that are white supremacists. Yeah, that's a fact. So, you're not casting blame on the Tutsis. Yeah. I hear you. Okay, it's differentiated.
So it's like Israel. You've got Bibi Netanyahu doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
Okay, and he does literally hate those Gazans.
Yes.
And you have the same thing and with this Tutsi supremacy.
Gotcha.
And we're not talking about all Israelis. We're not talking about all Rwandans or Tutsis. Yeah. And we have to get away from this Rwandan Tutsi thing because you have Hutsis. You have people whose the mother's Tutsi and the father's Hutu. You know, okay. this great wonderful divide is only a construct which feeds the narrative.
Yes.
So anyway, you have so we come now to the militias. So you have in Congo, and I explained to you earlier that people don't want to know about the war. This war that's been going on, the violence in Eastern Congo, they don't want to know because it's been made so complicated. And this has been a very interesting tactic. What a fantastically clever idea it was of someone's, I wonder who, to make it so complex that all the world will see is that you have African militias, and then immediately the mind associates with AK-47, sunglasses, raping. It's already there pre-programmed.
Yeah.
So you have African militias vying for control of the mines, of these very, very profitable mines. And that is not true. I wrote an article, I think I gave it a good title. I called it Smoke and Mirrors, the game of war in Eastern Congo. So the world is presented with a picture of, currently they're called M23. So March 2023, this movement, this militia movement is called M23. And that's what their current name is. Before then, they had a different name, and in some time in the future they'll have another name again, because that's what they do. They just keep renaming, they keep relabeling and renaming themselves, reinventing themselves as something else. Anyway, so M23 say that they exist. So we're going back now to Rwanda, and you have this whole story that the Hutus were the genocidaires, and the Hutus hate the Tutsis, and the Hutus want to kill the Tutsis. So this is not true, huh? And so you have a large number of let me just not get so that I'm getting confusing here. Rwanda's pretext for being within Congo's borders, because Rwanda has always had this thing that they have to protect for their own national security, and for the security of their population, that they have to stop a movement called the FDLR. And that has always been their pretext. The FDLR is presented as a militia, a rebel militia, and they exist in Eastern Congo, and they are the pretext for Rwanda's incursions onto Congolese soil. Okay. Now, Rwanda have always been on Congolese soil.
So so do they have you're saying they have a permanent military incursion or basing in Congo? That's permanent, or they periodically go in whenever there's something that whenever a fire is lit by this other group that you just mentioned, that they periodically go in?
The UN have just issued a report in July, and have stated that there are 4,000, so this is according to the UN, right? 4,000 Rwandan troops in Congo right now. 4,000.
Wow.
Okay, so when you talk about M23, or you talk about any of the other names that M23 have previously been known by, a Congolese person will just say that's Rwanda. Okay. M23 are Rwanda.
Okay.
They're not just Rwandan backed, which is what the world is, voices in France and even voices in Britain and America are saying, oh my goodness me, Rwanda are backing M23. They've always backed M23. They are M23.
I see.
M23 are the forces of Rwanda.
And when you were saying, you'd written that there were over 200 militias active in the Congo, are they all M23, or are they mostly M23, or what is this?
It's the militia. It's the militia game.
Okay.
So you have this bizarre acronym soup.
Okay.
And this has been going on for years and years and years. That you have different acronyms for different militias. And they sometimes morph into something else.
I see. Yeah.
Basically, if you sat down with someone in Congo and you said, what's going on? They'll say, it's Rwanda and Uganda. But the Western world, we all think it's rebel militias.
Yeah, locally.
The truth is just such a simple thing. It's such a simple thing. It's the forces it's the Rwandan military calling themselves M23, or it's the Ugandan military calling themselves ADF or Codeco or whatever. It's not complicated. But we have been presented with this massively complicated story, and they're still doing it. And I'll bring a name out here. I don't often bring names out, okay? Jason Stearns. Very key gatekeeper of this whole narrative, this complex thing of the acronym soup, of all the different militias, instead of just saying, hang on a minute, Rwanda are M23 and Uganda are ADF, Codeco, whatever, because that's all it basically is.
Who is this
And
person?
he's
Jason, this Jason guy? Yeah.
Jason Stearns. This is advisor to U.S. Security Council.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't often bring out personal names, but that name I will bring out.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's only recently that Tshisekedi, the president of DRC, he came out 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and called a spade and said Rwanda are backing M23.
Right.
And this changed everything, okay? Everything. Prior to that, we all have to go along with the story, with the myth of the rebel militias who are protecting, they're vying for the mines. The rebel militias, all 200 of them, are vying for control of the mines.
It's like gangs of New York. It's just, you're told it's gangs of New York. Everyone's just vying for their jurisdiction. It's the way it is. And no, there's this higher top-down hand that you're saying that, so the current president of the DRC brought attention publicly to Kagame and Uganda's role in supporting all of these militias. Oh, okay. And he just did that. And you're saying that fact that he did that is connected, is what you're saying, to this explosion of violence in...
Well, no. The explosion of violence, I'm not 100% sure, but I know it started with when Biden came in. That's why the Congolese love Trump, because things quietened right down. But it escalated with the Biden administration. What Tshisekedi did, which is also very much a part of things, he said, he asked MONUSCO, the UN peacekeeping force that has been there forever and a day, to leave. Why would he ask MONUSCO to leave? And he actually officially asked them to leave by December 2023.
Wow. I'm guessing they have not left yet.
No,
of course not. Oh, that's interesting. So he's really breaking the script. So he's being, you sense that he's being punished right now, or there's an effort to try to rain fire down from the skies to try to bring him back in line by this, or no? Is that naive? No. What would you say?
They're trying to. So when we realized that he was made in America, Britain, and Israel. They manufactured Paul Kagame. And they also put Museveni into power, and they're quite happy for those two presidents to remain in power. So completely lost my train of thought.
Well, I was just referencing the connection between this massive outburst of violence and the courageous this expression of courage by the president to call out Kagame and also call for the expulsion of this UN peacekeeping force. So I was making that, and you were adding more clarity or context to my maybe superficial.
No, so that's wonderful. Thank you so much. So they are what they're heading for, and I am in absolutely no doubt whatsoever about this. Is they're heading for a humanitarian disaster. Because what they want is to create a situation where either it might be a health emergency, and so we must keep our eye on this thing called Mpox. They call it Mpox, monkey virus. You get like smallpox pustules on your hands and your face. And the WHO have declared that it is the next health emergency in Central Africa. It's been declared in Burundi and it's been declared in Eastern Congo. No one that I know or have spoken to in either of those countries have seen anyone with it. No one. So I think they're trying to create a situation. It might be a medical thing, probably to do with these camps. I'm thinking either a massacre, a massive massacre, like Rwanda 1994, or it's going to be a medical thing that shuts it all down. You then have to bring in a massive humanitarian intervention. Under the guise of a UN humanitarian intervention, your any DRC government sovereignty over that region is removed.
Yes.
So this, you know what I mean, don't you?
Oh yeah.
I mean, this has been done so many times.
Well, that was one of the lessons that they wanted to embed into the zeitgeist after 1994's massacre, was that it happened because we did not have a global supranational police military force that could have stopped it, and because we didn't have a one world government, thus this massacre happened. So that was one of the lessons they embedded into our collective psyche. So the fact that this is, of course, what they didn't stop with that narrative. They've only pushed further ahead with that. As is the case, I think we're seeing also similarly in the Gaza, in the Israeli Palestine situation, inflamed. It's a very similar sort of cocktail of injustice and insanity that's leading to just a total pressure cooker of injustice. And of course, what's hovering about in the discussions in all corridors is, well, this wouldn't happen if we didn't have these fascist nation states with all of their problems and corruption and everything else. If we didn't have those things, and we just had some enlightened bureaucracy that was capable of having a monopoly over military power and economic power, then we could have peace on earth. And maybe, BlackRock should own the Gaza, and maybe these private corporations it would be better if they just owned the cobalt mines anyway, because we need that for the fourth industrial revolution. So, it's really sloppy thinking, but a lot of people get sucked into that.
Absolutely. So that's the end game, I would say. It's definitely the end game. And the situation in the camps is not by accident. It's all part of a grander plan.
So,
which is,
before we taper out on this thing, because I on the one hand, I want you to tell people about your fundraiser, about your book, about what you're doing with your associates right now to bring both awareness and also support to the people in need right now. And maybe number two, I would like to end with a little contrast to the positive potential for Congo and the broader Africa going into this crisis and into the future that we're sort of heading into a collective storm here. So what are some of the pathways, top-down policy pathways that would provide for a durable remedy to these issues? So two-part problem there, or two-part question.
I'll answer the second one first. So you ask any Congolese person, you say to them, what's going to stop this situation? What's going to put a stop to this violence and everything that's been going on in Congo? And they'll look at you and they'll just say, get rid of Kagame. It's so simple. He is the conduit for everything that's going on. And if he is got rid of and put before the ICJ or anybody which has any clout whatsoever, him and Yoweri Museveni, and tried for the grossest of crimes against humanity, along with many of the other psychopaths, murderers, butcherers in his administration, then we'll be looking at a world that is finally looking at some kind of justice for all these 12 million plus Congolese who've been killed and all the Rwandans who've been killed. So just to give you a flavor of what it's like to be Rwandan, because they're voiceless, the Rwandan journalists, I think it's probably the shortest lifespan of any job is to be a Rwandan journalist and speak out about Paul Kagame or life in Rwanda, because you won't even make it till supper time. Is that recently he closed 4,000 churches. So that's 4,000, and he closed them down on the grounds of health and safety. But what it means is that dissent against Kagame is so intense now within Rwanda, because of course, what else would be going on in the churches that he has to shut 4,000 of them on the spot? People are desperate. The Rwandans within Rwanda who are subject to this dictatorship are absolutely voiceless. Right. So that's one thing he's done. But ask any Congolese person. And there was a point a couple of years ago when news got through. Everyone thought that Kagame had died. And the celebrations in Congo at the news that Kagame was dead was more than if Congo had won the World Cup. People exploded. They were absolutely overjoyed. So, get rid of Paul Kagame.
We are not advocating. We are not advocating. Just to be clear, as a disclaimer, any type of violence done to Kagame. We're not saying that, but there is some legal issues that have to be brought to his doorstep.
Attention. Absolutely. We want to see him in court. Yes. So Friends of Congo have got an excellent letter that you can send to Congress. If you go to Friends of Congo website, that's Maurice Carney. They're running a huge campaign about these camps in Goma.
It's this one here.
And you can sign that letter to Congress and get that off to stop the US backing of Rwanda, because Rwanda is backed primarily by America and Britain. The same thing needs to happen in the UK. So you can go to Friends of Congo and support their campaign. And you can also please come to GoFundMe, which is being run by myself and my colleagues, Samuel and Choma Phillips of Musingi Africa magazine, which is an incredibly positive and beautiful, spiritually uplifting website. And we are running a GoFundMe campaign to get as much help as we possibly can to get these kids, many of the kids, out of those camps, as many of the young girls, and to bring the world's attention onto the absolutely bestial horrors, this extraordinary misery that these people are being subjected to. So that GoFundMe page is Goma Refugee Crisis. But if you go to Musingi Africa magazine, you'll find a campaign and a video and also some information because I've co-authored the book Fathers of Pan-Africanism with Samuel Phillips, and we're donating 10% of all book sales to the GoFundMe campaign. So please, please, please help us to do something.
And that's your new book right there, Fathers of Pan-Africanism. What lessons can young Africans learn? This is okay. So this is just a recently released book by you and Samuel Phillips. Okay, so people can buy this going to kobo.com and get their ebook right there, or as was just showcased, as you just pointed out, here's the GoFundMe platform that you've set up on Musingi
Africa
magazine.com, which will be all linked in the description box under this video as well. Thank you, PD, for elucidating this completely neglected but extremely morally and strategically important crisis that I'm sure was off the radar for most people who are watching this right now. And I'm sure that I'm sharing the general sentiment of everyone watching when I say thank you enormously. And I'm looking forward to future writings, interventions, and classes that you will come to give ever more so and deliver for the Rising Tide Foundation and for our audience more broadly with the Canadian Patriot magazine. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you very much.